Hey everybody, Ted Vaughn, host of Future Nonprofit. We just recorded one of our most amazing episodes with Bernhard Kowatsch, the Head of Innovation Accelerator at the UN World Food Program. We talk to amazing people at amazing organizations, but to talk with somebody working at the scale and level of the UN about innovation and how they're approaching unbelievably huge problems at scale is absolutely breathtaking. So check out this episode. Hope you enjoy it. Take care. Okay, so a couple of just quick icebreaker questions, Bernhard. First one is this. If you were explaining to a 5-year-old what you do for a living, how would you tell that 5-year-old in a simple statement what it is that you do for a living?
Wow, that's challenging. So for a living, we're working with new tools, new startups that help us end global hunger and other global issues such as climate change.
Perfect. That was awesome. Are you a music guy? Is music a big part of your life, or?
I used to play piano for over a decade, and also saxophone. So I love music, but also a very varied interest in lots of different genres.
Okay, well let's ask this question. If you're speaking, or when you're speaking, if you could have one genre or style or song of music accompany you as you're walking into the room. So this is the Bernhard opening segment. You're walking in, and this is the music or the style or the song that is accompanying you wherever you go. What is it? Is it jazz? Is it Rachmaninoff? Is it, where do you go?
So I would say jazz. So it would take John Coltrane or something like that. So, it's I think on the edge, innovative, fresh. So.
I love it. Yeah. Same here, by the way. I played sax and piano and a little guitar.
Oh wow!
So I'm a huge fan of jazz, and Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Brad Mehldau. There's some incredible stuff I listen to on a regular basis. So. All right. Well, let's dive in. I'd like to start with your early life. So you've had an incredible career. You're doing incredible things. But when you were a kid, was the work you're doing today what you had your sights set on, or did that find you later in life? What did you want to be and do when you were a kid growing up?
Oh wow, I'm not even sure. I guess for the longest period of time, I probably would have thought I might becoming a professional pianist, which I did not pursuing. I studied business at university, have business administration, commerce, international management. So I think when kind of graduating from high school, what was interesting for me was I was fascinated by the business world, how technology works, but at the same time I always had a very big interest in the social impact and impact on this planet, how you can actually make that happen. But I probably would have never imagined I would do what I'm doing right now.
And you spent some time at Boston Consulting Group, which is a formidable, significant organization. What was your journey into BCG? Did that again kind of find you, or did you pursue it?
Definitely something that I actively pursued. So at university, when I was doing my master in business administration, one of the things I was also had a major in strategic management and consulting, actually, for that matter. Back in the days, what I found fascinating about is of course the impact orientation of the work that you're doing. Now in that case, it's the impact that you're creating for companies to make more money, but also you're actually creating new businesses, you're actually leading to better results, you're actually creating products that are solving problems that people have at very big scale. So that was something that I found appealing, including of course, if you work in management consulting, you're accepting that you're working a lot, but you're also learning a lot. So definitely a lot of the things that professional skill sets in terms of how do you present information, how do you communicate, how do you actually analytically solve a problem. You learn a lot of basic skill sets that are valuable in lots of different settings.
Connect the dots for me, Bernhard, between piano and pursuing music and what you're doing today. I know in my own life, there's a lot of overlap, synergy, and connective tissue between music and between consulting and business and innovation. Do you feel like those two things have had similarities, or have there been parallels or connective tissue between those?
I mean, yes and no. I do think there's an element there that's about creativity, about like finding new solutions. Like I think the mindset of entrepreneurship, but then also some of the skill sets that you need in terms of how can you bring people together, connect with people, actually find topics that are relevant and resonate with people, and I think that's a theme of, you know, whether you are working in business or in nonprofits or for a social impact cause, that it is very relevant. Like you do need to get people together, and you also need to try to like, okay, how can you actually work with others, or you know, starting from the early days of like, you know, when you're playing in a band or something, to yes, you actually have to do something together. But it's also about like, I do think the theme about creativity like is actually quite interesting one.
The person in your life as you were growing up, as you were being molded, today as an adult, you're doing profound work. Who's the person, perhaps a mentor, a parent, an uncle, an aunt? Who is that person that you think had the most significant impact on your upbringing that you still think about or reference today?
I mean, it's probably like, you know, again, if you go childhood, it probably would be my parents, in terms of like just, you know, being bold and like essentially pursuing like also unpopular things that are you care about because you believe in that. So like it probably is like it's probably one of those angles. And then of course in professional life it could be, you know, professor at university, but like also to be fair in BCG, but also my co-founder for Share the Meal, or like now United Nations, like mentors that I've had, or like also advisors in my current role, where I believe I really profited from lots of people that encouraged me and like in pursuing things that are the right things to do, and as well as like, you know, essentially not having fear of failure.
Tell me more about that, not having fear of failure. Has that been a theme that's run consistent in your life, or is that something new that you've grabbed a hold of?
I think, I mean, it might have been a theme in which comes, I believe, probably from like, you know, taking accountability for things, but then also like, you know, sometimes having hard choices in terms of like, for instance, going from BCG, working at the UN World Food Program, starting a startup that's called Share the Meal with a friend, and then now our World Food Program Innovation Accelerator. I mean, all of these have been like choices to make where it might, like looking back now, it looks like that made a lot of sense. At this point of time, you know, some of these decisions were made in terms of like, well, you know, that might work out, it might not work out, right?
I mean, it's like soloing in jazz. And they work. Yeah, my life has been similar. It's a series of tripping and stumbling your way forward with a degree of grace and hustle, and then looking back and going, oh, look, it seems to have worked out. But it wasn't, you know, this thoughtful, linear, perfectly planned pathway, right? And I think that's going to be true for a lot of people listening.
No, absolutely. Including, like, I guess one of the advice that I'm giving people that want to go into the social impact world from private sector is that you need to embrace non-linear pathways, or like kind of strategic risks to take, because in a lot of sense, like a lot of non-profit work or also working for the UN, like it's not like you perform and therefore you will be promoted, or like you have done this therefore you get a raise. Like it's not like, it's not functioning that way.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. The non-linear pathway, is that the phrase that you would use for your own career journey and your own journey in and within the social impact space? Is it's been a non-linear journey where you've taken risks and done things, but it wasn't this perfectly structured pathway?
I think I would rather call it like having a career in private sector first, and then using the skills you've learned for something that actually moves the needle in nonprofits. And to be fair, like I did not know this when we're starting to work for the Boston Consulting Group. Like how that skill set would really translate into like a non-profit impact. But I think there's a lot of different roles in private sector that have its parallel or a usefulness in non-profits. There's actually a lot more that needs to be done to just showcase this as well, like how these types of skill sets, like, also the business mentality, working with startups, building sustainable solutions, like these types of things can make a difference. And I'm often like talking about this where it's whether we bring startups and innovation thinking into the UN, into nonprofits, or whether we bring sustainability, ESG, the sustainable development goals into private sector companies. Technically, it doesn't make any difference because we should be trying to achieve the same outcomes, I would hope.
And when you say achieve the same outcomes, whether you're in for-profit or nonprofit, we're both chasing making this world better in some macro or micro way.
Absolutely. And like, yes, there are still companies and individuals out there that, chase money for and do not care about other, societal or social or climate issues. But I think this is something that a lot of companies do need to ask themselves really, properly. Is like, is this how we foresee our future to be, including like, well, even if you do not believe in that, like a lot of your employees and staff will actually think about this, where people care. People actually want to do the right thing. And it's like, I sincerely believe in the good in people. And it's just that a lot of people don't know how they can help or how they can make a positive impact.
Let's talk about your journey to the World Food Program. So I believe you went from Boston Consulting Group into the World Food Program. How long were you at BCG, and what was that journey like into World Food Program?
No, so I was actually 5.5 years with the Boston Consulting Group. I was mainly working with industrial goods companies, tech companies, incidentally building a lot of businesses, like doing new product launches, marketing optimizations, things like that. And then I took a leave of absence from BCG, and during that, actually BCG allows you to also work for nonprofit organizations. So I found a role at the World Food Program. I applied, and well, that's how I started and decided to stay. Like that's how. But like essentially, by starting at the World Food Program at the time, it was a role that was essentially like in the business or the CFO's area of the World Food Program. And that's what I used to actually build up the business innovation team, kind of the internal management consulting team that also still exists. And like, this is something that for me, this was an eye-opener. Like BCG supports the World Food Program pro bono, like for, I think now it's maybe like 15 years or more even right now, of free consulting. And for me, this was one of the things where I was asking myself, well, the organization actually is very private sector oriented. Like a lot of people actually have this mindset of, in the world that we're in right now, there's like up to 783 million hungry people. Helping people, whether it's in emergencies, like, physical food, cash-based transfers, but then also working with smaller farmers, school meals, like it's very business-oriented. Like you can actually measure the success of what you're doing, like very tangibly, which is also something why I believe like what World Food Program and a lot of other organizations do as well. Is like, it is very tangible what you do. Like I know there's also a lot of other really important and good work, which is maybe not as tangible. And like, but that's something that, I found fascinating. And at the time I was given the opportunity then to essentially build up the internal management consulting team. And so I literally used the exact same skills that I used in private sector just for the World Food Program for, doing like process optimization, like supply chain optimization, looking into like how to do better fundraising, things like that. But like that was one of the areas of like, okay, like that transition was really about also like, how can we find this, like how can my skill make a difference for some of these big problems in the world?
Was innovation a big topic of study or something that you were passionate about even at BCG, or did innovation or the need to be more innovative find you, or did you find it later in your career?
I guess I might have been passionate about this, but like the realization that it is probably only found me later. Because when I look back and what I did for like projects for clients at BCG, like, and not all of that is, you don't have full control about the projects or the companies that you work for, but like I ended up doing a lot of this kind of creating new businesses, creating a new product, creating better marketing for these types of products. And then I just like at the World Food Program, but then also like Share the Meal, but also now at the World Food Program Innovation Accelerator, this is an intentional choice where it's about like, okay, how can we actually create better outcomes? How can we create solutions to problems that maybe have been there before? And a lot of times, let's say, will we be ending global hunger by just trying to get more donations? No, I mean, it will help, and we do need more donations. Like World Food Program also right now, we are facing like overall across the world, like a severe funding crisis, to be honest. And so, yes, we do need cash, we do need the funding and the donations that help. But at the same time, that alone will not end global hunger. Like if we just try, well, I guess we could just do that if we had enough funding. But the question is like, will that ever happen?
Well, and even with enough funding, I think ultimately you're battling issues around people, systems, integrity, character. I mean, there are lots of things that often, I think, redirect funding away from people. So, okay, let's talk about the Share the Meal program. So you, at some point, were inspired to create Share the Meal. What was your journey into that? And what was the story behind that?
So it actually goes back to a point where I was discussing with a friend, and we realized that it only costs the World Food Program 80 cents to feed a child for a day. And at the time, we were actually quite shocked because I don't think a lot of people really know that. And we had this idea of like, well, imagine people would know this, and you would have this button on your phone, and like, you would have a dinner conversation, or you're going out with friends, you're enjoying yourselves. Why wouldn't you share that meal with a child in need? And so this is how essentially the idea behind Share the Meal came about. It's still working like that. So it's an app on your iPhone or an Android phone. You can download it, and like with a tap on your phone, you can share your meal. So 80 cents feeds a child for a day. Or by now it's also like, you can share your meal with adults, or like also like, where the needs are the greatest. And there's over 190 million shared meals already. So soon 200 million shared meals, over $130 million. And it was also App of the Year by both Apple and Google in the year 2020. Now, and this is, Share the Meal is one of those things where, why did that not exist before? And like, of course it should exist, right? Now, but it's also funny, like at the time when we started this, like we had lots of people that came to us and said, great, this is going to transform the world. And others said, well, great gimmick, but it's never going to work. And I think it's, in hindsight, nobody would have expected it to ever be as successful as it is. But it's one of those things, if we hadn't tried, we wouldn't know what is happening.
If you deconstruct or, kind of unpack the journey of success, what was it about Share the Meal that hit that tipping point of unbelievable success and engagement?
Funnily enough, I think it's probably choices we made very early on in developing Share the Meal to say, like, we really want to make sharing a meal, donating simple. And also it's geared towards like mobile first users, young people who are like, they want transparency about where their money goes. They want to have choice where their money goes. And I think, and it's not just like, well, let's create a donation app. There's actually an emotional connection behind, I want to share my meal with a child in need, I think, which I still think that was one of the key success factors why people actually believed in like doing that. It's not just like a random app, but there's actually a thing that you're creating behind it. A lot of people joined, like, so it's like a lot of organizations, companies that said like, hey, that's actually smart. Like, why wouldn't we support more of that? And like this is one of the aspects of like, it's so little individually, like kind of this crowdfunding aspect. However, like if you take it together, like you and your friends' friends, and then like the friends, you can actually achieve a lot. And like as I was saying earlier, over 190 million shared meals. That's, who would have thought that?
Yeah, so this perfect storm of generational value shifting meets the ease, low barrier technology. In hindsight, it seems obvious that it would have been a massive success, but it never feels that way when you're forging the road forward, right? It always feels like,
No, exactly. And like I remember like how many people told me that this is never going to work. So, but it's on the flip side also, like this is kind of like what we're teaching also, startups or innovation in our startup accelerator at the World Food Program Innovation Accelerator is like you need to test your critical assumptions. And it's like fairly early on we realized that people care, people actually want to help, and surprisingly a lot of times it's like, they would actually help if it's easy for them, or they would actually help if they have proof or the trust that their money actually makes a difference.
Let's unpack that for a second. It strikes me that innovation, risk-taking in today's pace of change requires a degree of resiliency or ability to fail successfully, to handle risk. And I think people romanticize innovation because they look at a successful innovation and they just assume it was this amazing, successful fireworks. It must have just been this awesome. They don't see all the resistance and headwind and failure and pushback, maybe even relational tension. How have you done with that? Are you just thick-skinned? Is it just a natural part of your hardwiring? Or talk to me about your journey with failure, pushback, resistance, challenge.
I believe in like, this is like with, let's say, at Share the Meal, for instance, with my co-founder, Sebastian, like, he also went on to found his next startup. So like, I think in hindsight, like you realize, oh yeah, so like there's definitely an element of like, you probably should have a thick skin, or like you need to be the motivator in chief, or like the person who's really passionate about solving this issue. If you're not, look, then maybe you're not maybe not the right problem, or you're not the right person. Like both of that is fine. The other thing is like, and this is something that if people ask me for advice, is like, step one is if you're working on a startup, you need a co-founder or somebody. One is because that's actually good proof that if you are passionate, you can convince at least one other person that this is worth solving. Very good, right? The other thing which is true is that if you have two people at least, you also have you're balancing it out specifically in a startup, or if you're doing to try something like really innovative. There will be challenges, like, and you know it already right now. Now you can actually work with that by, testing it early, learning early, trying to co-develop with the people that are going to use it. So you're kind of de-risking your learning faster rather than later. But at the same time, if you have at least two people who are like doing this together, then the chance that one of the two people is always, motivated, upbeat, and wants to actually still keep on going is actually a lot higher.
Man, there is such a powerful point here around the role of a partner. No, very rarely is a single person sufficient to drive an idea across the finish line. Finding those there's no way this podcast or my company Historic or none of these things would exist without my partner Mark, right? There's just no way. And it sounds like finding those partners when you're doing significant steps of innovation is a critical theme in this podcast.
I would definitely agree, because at least having two people is a great way for also mental sanity, somebody to bounce off ideas, to really also try pursuing things that are maybe irrational for a lot of people. But if there's at least two people that agree that this is a problem worth solving, and this is something you want to pursue, I think you already have gone a long way. And then of course it depends also what is. Ideally, you have a complementary skill set, having an ability to also work out if there's disagreements or conflicts or strategic choices that are big and major. So that's definitely also an area where you want to be able to, move into the future into great things to achieve.
Man, it's such a profound point, and I guarantee you, one of the points we'll be teasing out in this episode is that theme of partnership, because that really hasn't come up in any of the previous episodes, and I think you're making a profound point about partnership and the role a partner plays. I mean, we at our company, Historic, we fundamentally changed how everything we do into a workshop design sprint setting, even identity design. So doing live design with the client in a room in a sprint setting, every client thinks there's no way. Every single time, it's amazing how that process of working together over an extended period of time develops amazing results so much faster than the classic beauty pageant approach to a design process. So, okay, let's talk about the Innovation Accelerator and connect the dots between, we talked about BCG into the World Food Program into Share the Meal, and now Share the Meal sparked the Innovation Accelerator. Connect the dots there.
So when my friend Sebastian and I started Share the Meal, we did, we were able to convince other people to support us pro bono. There was, a moment when 20 people were working on Share the Meal and nobody was getting paid. Yes, we were able to actually pull this off also because we were able to find individuals who wanted to support, who want to be part of this journey, companies, lots of supporters that say hey, that's a great idea, we want to support this. And there just weren't that many social impact accelerators out there, or support systems for social entrepreneurs. And I think this is when it hit me, where there must be a lot more ideas, innovations, and startups out there that could actually make a difference and could be transforming the way we're looking at the world, but they never have a chance. They never are able, and so this is essentially also when I had then the opportunity to start the World Food Program's Innovation Accelerator. So it was the executive director of the World Food Program and she was actually behind the driving force behind saying we need to have more innovation. We need to be more systematic in pursuing innovations for the organizations. Finding the first funder or partner in this case for the Innovation Accelerator, which was the German federal government, Development Ministry, German Federal Foreign Office, but also the State Ministry here in Bavaria. And I think this actually was the kickstarting of a journey of saying, having this idea, we need this kind of replication of a startup accelerator, like what Silicon Valley does, but for global social good. And at the same time, getting funders on board to say okay, that's a way how we can pursue innovation, but also de-risk innovations and startups. Because I think on the one hand, innovations are risky, but something like a startup accelerator, that actually increases your chances of success.
Unpack that word de-risk. So de-risking innovation, again, just go into a little bit more depth on that.
Common wisdom is 90% of startups fail. And whether you talk about innovation or startups, now it always depends on what are you actually talking about? Is failure not reaching your initial objectives that you have set yourselves, or are you looking at opportunity cost? Is one thing better than the other, right? So now, specifically in social impact or nonprofits, you don't necessarily want to fail. You don't want to put people at risk. So you also don't want to waste money. Now, but this is where it's interesting. When you're using things lean startup thinking, human-centered design, you can actually learn a lot faster, and you're de-risking, you're actually avoiding waste. And I think that's a concept that for a lot of people who have been brainwashed in the traditional thinking, I need to first plan for 6 months, then I prepare for 6 months, and then I start implementing. If you compress the planning, preparing, and implementation into, you literally do this within 1 week, and you start learning immediately, getting feedback into your product design, into your service design. You're actually de-risking, you're learning faster, you're building something that actually solves the problem that a client, a user of the solution has. And I think that's a really, really powerful element of innovation methodologies, that it's not just necessarily failure or risky. You can actually be better in solving people's problems by using innovation of these methodologies.
I'd like to just go a little deeper now into culture. So wrote a book about the intersection of brand and culture, and am a real big proponent on innovation, but the culture required to sustain, to allow, much less sustain, proactive innovation. What have you found to be true about people, leadership, organizational structure and design when it comes to supporting or fostering innovation?
I mean, as World Food Programme, we're also the co-leads of the UN Innovation Network. I mean, we right now, as WFP Innovation Accelerator, we actually run a total of 16 different social impact accelerator programs for or with other partners. So it's like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, it's the German government, it's the Luxembourg and Austria. Like, wow. Different agencies actually, like for different social impact goals. Now, I think in terms of culture and organization, like I think one element that is crucial is whenever people are thinking about like how do we do innovation, the culture of the organization really does make a difference. And it's like, is innovation something that's welcomed? Is it encouraged? How is innovation seen generally? Or is it more like, or are you still in a very hierarchical, traditional way where essentially new ideas are not being welcomed? Who can actually do this? So like there's a whole thing about this. Now, there's an element about the role that accelerator programs, incubators, innovation center, whatever you call it, and whatever the design of that entity is. What I've observed is that in a lot of different entities, the first step change in your ability to innovate is when there's at least one person whose job title mandate is innovation as such, because then that person has the mandate and like can actually go around and actually facilitate things, share knowledge, like get people together. In the next step change is then typically once you start actually building up some sort of central capacity, at least, because that allows you to then also have more of a like leverage on like whatever you're having, and ideally paired with access to executives or like decision makers in the organizations and funding. And I'll give you an example. Like at the World Food Programme, one of the first thing we did even before we started our accelerator, we did a World Food Programme Innovation Challenge that was sent out by our executive director, where everybody across the world could participate and say like, hey, I've either done something already, I've implemented an innovation, or I have a new idea, and like say, come forward. And we did like a competition and an award that, the executive director of the World Food Programme, like the global CEO, she essentially awarded those teams with that award of getting an innovation award.
Yeah, you make a fantastic point about the need for appropriate authority and organizational structure. I think sometimes people think innovation is just this skunk works and it's this bottom-up thing. You don't sustain innovation if it doesn't have some form of permission from the top of the organization cascading down, shaping a culture in which this stuff can take place. Talk to me about the connection to, and forgive me for not knowing the answer to this, is it COP28 or COP? How do you refer to it?
I would say COP28, but like, yeah. So
okay. Okay. I mean, it's the what is it, the Council of Party, or what's the acronym?
Yeah, I'm also not getting this right most of the time. So it's like
so many acronyms.
No, it's like the COP is the conference of the parties. So
conference of the parties, conference, not count. Yeah, okay, awesome. Yeah. So why do you think there has been this radical shift into embracing innovation in the fight against climate change? I mean, maybe it's as obvious as there's a shared sentiment around needing to do it, but do you find that there's an awakening taking place, or that people have always been awakened to it? There's just more permission or funding for it. Like what's happening in this moment?
I think there's a lot of different things happening at the same time. Now, I think historically, like the topic of climate change or severe weather events or like irregular weather patterns, like there has been moments when that maybe hasn't been taken seriously. Now I think we are living in times where a lot more people realize that some of the scientific facts cannot be ignored anymore. And when you look at the actual underlying data and like forecasts that we have in front of us, in all honesty, like we need all hands on deck. We need to make more progress a lot faster if we want to have a chance to actually still have a livable planet on that we are actually not just in like very wealthy people, but also like in developing countries, that everybody has a future on this planet. I think we need innovation, we need technology, we need private sector companies, all of that together in as much as we can to make more progress. And I think this is where a lot of these elements come together, including companies now getting committed to we need to make more actions ourselves. How can we a positive influence in the fight against climate change?
I'm going to jump into a few different topics just again to respect time.
Sure.
And I love that we got the climate change in there because I want to make sure it's a part of the show, but I don't want to get too lost on it. I want to shift to this idea of complexity and yet needing to make complex ideas simple for the purpose of funding or helping people embrace or engage. Talk to me about the challenges that you face when trying to gain support or funding for innovative projects or coaching people who have these complex ideas to make them simple. That tension between complexity and communicating or presenting something in a way that is approachable and doesn't have as big of a barrier.
If you ask me, communication or marketing skills, it's one of the elements that will be a game changer for if you want to achieve something big. And the reason for that is simple, is you need to think about the audience, who is going to receive your message. Now, if you have university professors talking to university professors, it might be fine to send very long documents that are very complex. Now, in a lot of cases, you need to think about who is on the receiving end, and even if they're very smart, maybe they have limited time, maybe they are not the experts in the topic. So what you actually need to achieve, when you're working on a big challenging topic or you're working on a startup that is doing something that is tremendous in terms of impact, great technology, great impact, you need to be able to get to people's hearts and also convince them that what you're working on is relevant. And in our accelerator, the World Food Programme Innovation Accelerator, one thing we're doing in almost all of our programs, we're essentially having people do pitch their startup idea, a 3-minute pitch, which is what people would do in Silicon Valley otherwise. And the specific reason for that is that's a skill that you need every day. You need when talking to partners, you need when you actually want to convince a funder, because you need to have your pitch nailed in terms of what's the problem you're trying to solve, what's your solution, what's the impact that you could have with that solution. And if you can't make the case, it is going to be problematic, because sometimes you might have the best idea, but people might not listen to you anymore because they've already mentally moved on.
Boy, it's such a profound point. So much of our coaching with our nonprofit clients is what will inspire a 6-figure gift. It's probably somebody who has that pitch nailed, who can communicate clearly, not so big and abstract, but not so tactical and narrow. It's that sweet spot that marketing and brand tend to try and live in. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the, I want to ask a personal question. You have what would seem to me, right, to be an amazing job, doing amazing things to help the world be better, working with, I'm sure, people who inspire you every day. At the same time, I'm sure there are things that are unbelievably frustrating about your job. What is the best part for you about your job? What is the thing that you love most about what you're doing today? Of
course, what we are working on here at the World Food Programme Innovation Accelerator is really inspiring in terms of that we are working on solutions using innovation, startups, technology that sustainably change how we are tackling some of these big problems. And I think being able to actually do that, I'm really grateful for doing that. Because I think a lot of people would want to do this maybe as a hobby or volunteer to do that. So I think it's really exceptional to be able to do that. Now, what is motivating is the aspect of we're looking at what success look like. Do these startups or innovations actually have an impact? And by the end of last year, the startups and innovation we supported positively impacted a total of 37 million people already. And they've raised a total of $200 million essentially to help scale those startups and innovation already. So looking into do they make a difference? They do, and they do that at scale, which is insanely amazing, right? Now, what is low points, of course, is right now, almost everything that we're doing so far is, it's actually grant funded. So we are constantly also looking for funders, partners who are coming to us and actually enable our work that we're doing. And to a certain extent, I can prove that what we're working on like makes a difference, and like we have, you know, a multiplier on the funds we get to like the impact that you're having. So in terms of like, if somebody has a business mindset, like it's the exact same thing. You invest based on that investment, you multiply your investment. That's essentially what we're working on. Now, what's sometimes can be frustrating is like, it actually doesn't matter how much impact you have, because you still need to convince people, you know, in a non-profit environment, that what you're working on is worthwhile, and like it's worthwhile the money. And like, we actually should invest a lot more money in doing a lot more of that good thing to actually have more impact, like, which is definitely one of the areas. And like, you know, at times it can also be challenging, where we have this running joke sometimes with like, you know, some you know, our legal division, like colleagues there, like they're actually like one of the biggest champion of enabling innovation. You wouldn't believe it, but like it's actually happening. And like we have this running joke saying, well, there's no precedent for doing this. And it's like, exactly. So this is why it's called innovation. And you know, there's always so much that you talk about innovation, where, you know, it's sometimes like doing the hard work of actually getting there. Once you have achieved it, it's all great. But like sometimes, you know, the journey to get there is actually a hard one.
Yeah, we find a lot of our nonprofit clients think they're innovative because they reacted to crisis. So reacting to COVID in innovative ways is different than having a proactive posture of innovation, where you're building it into your muscle memory and routinely doing it proactively, right?
And it's an interesting question also, right? Like, where I think even in crisis, you can embrace that and actually innovate in that. Now, a lot of times it's like, you know, it may or may not be the best moment to innovate as well, where what we're seeing a lot is like, let's say, working on innovations or startups, what you actually need to do is a lot of times the aspect of even you need to innovate now, so that when an emergency hits, you are prepared to then deploy the solution you've already developed. Because the mind space of people, you know, you might want a new solution. It's just like, right now you focus on the people you have to serve today. And if you don't have the mindset for actually thinking about like what happens in 2 weeks from now, like it's maybe not the best time to like really do out of the box innovation in that scenario.
You've touched on this. This word is a big word for our organization, and I believe it's an important word for innovation. So I'm going to ask you specifically about this word or this idea. You can tell me if you have no connection to it. Empathy. Empathy for the end user, empathy in innovation, empathy, a culture that highlights or that cultivates empathy. Do you find empathy to be an important skill or element to innovation?
Empathy is probably one of the core aspects of innovation. And like, you know, sometimes people may get like they may not recognize it as empathy, but like you also like see it as like, I don't know, behavioral science or human-centered design. Like there's a lot of things that or accountability towards affected populations. Like there's a underlying current here, which is like, we need to listen to the people we are serving, and like we should solve people's problems that are real problems, rather than things that we are not sure if it's an actual problem. And I specifically in the realm of innovation, I think this is also where it can be a tool to overcome like complicated, you know, even like unknowns and challenges, where like, you know, you might have a view on like whether solution A or solution B is right, but like if you co-develop with the people that you're serving, like you will actually get valuable input and data based on what you're learning from those people. And I just want to say, like, we also see this right now in our Innovation Accelerator here in Munich, in Germany. Like, we're over 80 people here actually right now, because we're running these 16 accelerator programs, and it's 45 different nationalities. And like part of the 67% female, by the way, but it's actually like one of the reasons why we have so many different actually backgrounds is also, yes, we want people who have the empathy for different cultural backgrounds, for different contexts, having worked in different spheres. Like I think it's an element that is very real, specifically in the innovation angle. You want to have diverse teams with different viewpoints.
Oh my gosh, this could be a whole different show. But the role of diversity in fueling innovation is such a powerful point, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I am assuming that you're intentional about that diversity on your team, and as
Absolutely.
awkward or difficult as that can be, it's not a happy coincidence that you're 67% female and have 47 nationalities.
Yeah, 45 nationalities, and like no, it's not a coincidence. Like it's intentional, and we also, I mean, we're trying to be like as diverse as we possibly can be. Now, there's still room to actually be more diverse for us, but like I think this is also something that I mean, we're part of the United Nations World Food Program, so something that core values that we take to our hearts. But it's also relevant for making innovation happen. So I think this is where you want to bring in different skill sets, different viewpoints, being able to co-create different solutions. Because it also opens up like new pathways or new thinking if you're in different contexts. Like sometimes it's also like the different backgrounds that people might have had prior to joining us. But it's specifically in the innovation field, yes, you do want to have diverse inputs because you actually create better and new solutions.
The future is moving quickly, right? The pace of change, the pace of discovery and innovation and shifting values and shifting climate. And what most excites you and what most concerns you or perhaps terrifies you about the next 3 years, the next 36 months? What are the opportunities that you see? What are the things that you find to be most exciting about the 3-year horizon?
I mean, maybe I'm starting with what I find most terrifying. It's, in all honesty, like it's. I mean, when we look at the number of hungry people across the globe, like for, I don't know, 3 decades, the world has made progress, and now like the last 6 years we are going backwards. And this is fueled by conflict, climate change, and also higher food prices, food inflation, fuel inflation. And so I think, and this is something that we all need to be concerned about, like there needs to be more effort on a political level from whoever can have an influence on like, the world needs to end wars and also conflicts. I think like that is something that is deeply concerning. It's the same with like climate change, like there needs to be more effort in actually tackling some of that. Now, what gives me energy or hope is actually the opportunities that we're seeing every day with like startups, innovations, technologies, like, and just to give you some examples, like, so at the World Food Program, we're using a tool called Optimus, is a big data optimization tool for supply chain, and food baskets for people. So in the last couple of years, we already saved $50 million that were reinvested in more food for people using big data analytics. And this is an example of like, would not have been possible if somebody would manually do this, but now it's possible. Another example, we've been supporting a startup called Nihilus. They are connecting ugly foods to urban food deserts. Right now, they are using an app and community buying, and they now make healthy food affordable to people who otherwise could not actually buy healthy foods in food deserts in urban settings, and you know, this would also not have been possible without technology, without great startup mindsets, and so on and so forth. And you know, like, and then there's still the power of like private sector investments. So we've been giving World Food Program beneficiaries, so like people who typically would be excluded from microfinance, access to finance to increase, like invest in their smallholder farms, invest into the small business. So it's actually a program called She Can. 70% of the recipients of that are actually like women that receive loans through that program. And it's working amazingly well, where, you know, these types of examples give me hope, where we see you can make a difference through, you know, some of these things, they're still early stage, but like, you know, Optimus saved $50 million already. Think about the impact that we can have like at large scale with all of that.
And I'm assuming all the things that you've just listed happened because somebody took a risk and they went into a quick sprint mindset and built something. This wasn't a 7-year journey in a traditional kind of product development cycle.
No, I mean, all of that is like the biggest predictor of success there was the team, to be honest. And for Optimus, it was a couple of colleagues in the World Food Program supply chain division that built it, with support, with funding support that they received also from private sector. Nihilus, it's a for-profit social business startup, great founders, and she can as well. It's coming to actually getting together different people with different skill sets and just making it happen. Now, I think that's a lesson learned as well. And I hope we can inspire some people also to say not only taking risks, but also let's pursue something. Let's we need money for emergency response, for humanitarian assistance. That's crucial. This is saving lives every day. And at the same time, we shouldn't juxtapose this, but there's also a room for we should work on some of these riskier, innovative solutions that make emergency response more effective, but also invest in the future. So we need less emergency response for the future. And I think this is just something as a thought that maybe some people get inspired by that.
There are people listening, Bernhard, that are new, young, or in the middle, lower part of the organization that they're serving in, and they want to innovate. They have vision, ideas, they have thoughts, they have passion, but they don't have power. They don't have authority. They don't have capital. They're in perhaps a legacy nonprofit. There might be a crust above them that doesn't understand the things we're talking about. What's your word to them? What would you say to that 30-year-old, wants to make a difference in the world, is reading all these books, follows you on LinkedIn, but just doesn't know how they can actually make a difference in this big organization, perhaps bureaucracy that they're working in?
So my advice to people earlier in their careers, okay, number one is always be excellent at your job, whatever the job is. And I'm saying this half jokingly, but it's really an element if you want to innovate and if you want people to take you seriously, they will look at your track record of touching stuff. If you work on things and you make it happen, you have a track record of achieving things, senior leaders, they are a lot more likely to take you seriously if you've always delivered on the things that you're working on. Similarly, when there's an opportunity for you to raise your hand to work on something that's maybe not your core job, something outside, maybe collaborate with other teams, great opportunity. Ideally, also you also have a great manager, a great leader in where you are that enables you either to experiment, to try out new things, to actually show that skill set that you're actually working on some of these opportunities. And maybe your organization, they want to work on AI, but nobody knows what AI is. And it's a great opportunity to show I actually put together a presentation on this topic. Maybe you enjoy reading it, right? I mean, I think not necessarily being tasked with something, but taking the liberty of saying hey, you take your time to actually invest in that. In addition, in over delivering in your day job, I think that's probably that's strategy. That's the best strategy. Now, if you can convince your boss or leadership otherwise to say hey, you already have delivered. Now maybe you can spend some time on pursuing innovations, out of the box ideas. I mean, that would be amazing too, of course.
Sage advice, so helpful. This is going to be a fantastic episode. I mean, we may need to turn this into 2 episodes. I'm not sure, but man, thank you so much. And I do want to say, is there anything you didn't communicate or say that you feel like you need to, or that's critical to get out for either your job or role or the UN?
So, just to say, as the World Food Program Innovation Accelerator, we are always looking for the best ideas, innovation startups across the globe. So actually everybody can apply on our website. It's innovation.wfp.org. We're also on LinkedIn, also on Twitter, now called X. And people can actually follow us for inspiration of other startups or innovation that we're supporting. We also, of course, always looking for funding for the work that we're doing. By now, we are also having our first ever loan fund to support startups together with you and CDF. But I think this is an element of, if anybody out there wants to collaborate, we are eager to share our learnings with others. We are trying to open source as much as we can so that others can replicate what we do. And at the same time, if people want, like, we're also offering services to others where, they say, hey, we have a need, we actually want to run an accelerator program, innovation program. It's actually something that we're doing because we recognize there's so much more potential with innovation out there. And whatever we can do to get there, I think is something we should be pursuing.
Love it. We'll make sure that those links and those ideas that you just shared are communicated effectively on the show. And in the notes, we'll put those links as well. So thank you again so much, Bernhard. Fantastic, so helpful. Really appreciate your time. And man, I really honor what you're doing and the work you're doing, and you're making a huge difference. So thank you so much for your contribution to our show. For more stories from experts in the industry and to learn how to take your nonprofit into the future, like this video, subscribe to our channel and podcast, and visit makehistoric.com/insights. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Ted Vaughn, and this is Future Nonprofit.